Homage to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Today we're going to delve a little deeper into the Buddha's teaching on giving, and more specifically into the gradual progression of giving as we practice and develop this quality on the Noble Eightfold Path. If you've been following the gradual teaching series, then you'll already know that the talk on giving, Dāna, is the first part of the Buddha's gradual instruction to lay people. From there, the Buddha talks on virtue or virtuous behavior, Sila Katang, then talk on heavenly realm, Sagga Katang, followed by talk on the danger, degradation, and defilement in sensual pleasures, Kamanang, Adinava, Ukarang, Sankilesang, and finally talk on the blessing of renunciation, Nekame, Anisangsa. And only after this gradual instruction, when the Buddha sees the person's mind is ready, receptive, free of hindrances, elated and confident, does the Buddha give the special teaching on the Four Noble Truths. The practice of giving, then, is one that is very important. It is clearly part of developing the non-greed path, alobha path, the wholesome path, which is non-greed, non-hatred, and non-delusion. And it needs to be acknowledged and understood as important, seen as one part of the path that needs cultivating and nurturing. Dāna, Sila, Bhavana, giving, virtue, and meditational development, these three are the foundations for our practice, and all three are associated with merit making. We often forget, or we don't know, that merit is a much needed thing on the Buddha's path, not simply to ascend upwards, but as a support or foundation for this wholesome path. If one's practice is void or absent of giving, then defilements and hindrances have an easier foothold, and the path and practice becomes or can become quite grim. It can become difficult, slow to progress, and maybe even blocked at times. If you're in the habit of giving, then you know that the mind is more easily lifted to higher mind states and can have a quality similar to being insulated from the heaviness of the world. In certain circumstances, the mind can get completely blissed out when giving, when there is so much joy and happiness in the mind. This could be when one is tuned in to the goodness of others, the generosity of others, or to be on the receiving end of it as well. It is one of the four blessings of giving. We know the four blessings as long life, good appearance, happiness, and strength. Ayurvana, Sukhang, Balang. So Sukha, happiness, is one of these blessings. If we understand that giving is important, then over time what we experience is almost like this refinement of how we can give. And we develop this progression or development of the Buddha's path. The Pali words we often associate with giving that help us to understand this gradual progression in giving is Dāna, which we use quite a lot. There's also the word Chāga, which is translated as generosity, but it's also known as giving up, letting go, abandoning. Chāga reminds us that when we give to others, we're giving up what we would have otherwise had for ourselves, letting it go for others. And then we have Nikama, which is translated as renunciating or renunciation, giving up worldly things, sensual pleasures. And this is the part where this progression of giving, we start to see with wisdom. We start to give with wisdom, with the right view. And the last word we'll reference is Sabbanissago, which is translated as giving up all, relinquishing all. The progression we are delving into starts with giving as Dāna and leads to giving up, letting go, and eventually relinquishment of all. It is part of the path and practice that leads to Nibbana. When we cultivate giving as part of our Dhamma practice, it's probably true that we give with expectations, with a bound mind, looking for some kind of reward in the future. And if you've heard the Buddha's answer to Venerable Sariputta's question on why is it that one gift is not of great benefit and fruit while the other is, and this is in the Dānamahapphalasutta, this is in Anguttara Nikāya. If you've heard that teaching from the Buddha, then you'll know that our thoughts and intentions are very important when it comes to giving. when we have certain kinds of thoughts that are filled with expectations, or where we do certain things out of obligation, custom, expectation, for practical reasons, or some kind of mental benefit, then this is the type of giving that keeps us bound to samsara. It is useful, but it is not the most fruitful and beneficial of giving. The last intention or thought around giving that the Buddha talks about to Venerable Sariputta is where one thinks that giving is an ornament of the mind, citta alankara, or an accessory or requisite of the mind, citta parikara, so a requisite towards the Buddha's path, towards mental purity. And it's only this last one that the Buddha says is of great fruit and benefit. The Buddha says that it will result in rebirth in companionship with the devas of Brahma's company or retinue, and that having exhausted kamma, psychic potency, glory and authority, one does not come and return to this state of being. So in the early stages where we begin to give, and as we gradually develop this practice, it can be like this, where we give with expectation and have certain defilements in the mind. But as we gradually progress, we start to understand that by giving, we're cultivating generosity. Giving and generosity overcomes the mental stain or defilement of stinginess, maccharya. Sometimes this is also translated as selfishness. And if you remember from our study and practice of the Vatthūpama Sutta, there are 5 kinds of stinginess. The first is stinginess for gain, labha maccharya. The second is stinginess for dwelling, avasa maccharya. The third is stinginess for family or groups, kula maccharya. The fourth is stinginess for reputation, vanna maccharya. And the final one is stinginess for dhamma, which is dhamma maccharya. So when we give from what we earn or gain in the world, we are reducing this stinginess for gain. This can be almsgiving or other forms of giving, offerings, sharing of what we have. And when we invite people to come and stay with us in our home, or to use our home for hosting an almsgiving, or dhamma talks, or retreats, or enabling someone to come and recuperate in your home, being generous with things in your home, then you reduce the stinginess for dwelling. When we practice inclusivity, then we overcome preferences towards only our own family, friends, groups. When we're more open-hearted towards others, want to include them, help them, whoever they are, any kind of living being, then we reduce this stinginess for family or groups. And when we do things without expectation of gaining a better reputation or some kind of respect or praise, maybe we do generous deeds without claiming, that was me, then we reduce stinginess for reputation. And when it comes to stinginess for Dhamma, when we start to listen to other people's ideas and opinions, when we don't measure and divide all kinds of Dhammas, when we don't get into disputes over views and opinions, then we overcome this stinginess for Dhamma. Consciously giving and being generous to overcome stinginess is a very good practice, a very powerful practice, because it instigates this wholesome path. It helps us to develop loving kindness or metta. When we are stingy, we can be mean-hearted because we have preferences, boundaries, priorities. We measure and divide according to those things. And when we're stingy or selfish, we tend to get absorbed with what is me and what is mine. We have a very strong sense of self. We're driven by that. But when we practice giving and allow generosity to flow, without this kind of stinginess or selfishness, we correct our view and we help to remove stinginess. And this helps to aid the removal of any impediments, any preferences that we still might be holding on to, because these are the things that block loving kindness, block metta. So when we develop in this way, we start to purify the mind. We start to lift it up. And it becomes this requisite towards the path. It's purity rather than defilement or mental stains. And in doing this, we start to see why giving is a factor of stream entry. If you remember the Thapati Sutta, this is in the Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 55, which is the chapter on stream entry, discourse number 6. And the Buddha gives this teaching to the king's two chamberlains, Isiddhata and Purana. And he tells them that if you possess 4 things, one is a stream enterer. The first 3 are associated with perfect confidence in Buddha, perfect confidence in Dhamma, and perfect confidence in the Sangha. And the 4th one, he says, is one dwells at home with a mind devoid of the stain of stinginess, freely generous, open-handed, delighting in relinquishment, one devoted to charity, delighting in giving and sharing. So you can see that as we make progress, we really want to start helping not just ourselves and our loved ones, but to help more others make merit, because we start to see the benefit of it, the value of it, the importance of it on the path. We may begin with inviting others to come to our home for almsgiving, or to listen to a Dhamma talk, or to come join us at the temple or the monastery. Or we may help someone out who doesn't know how to give Sangha Dana, make them feel at ease with the process. Or we may help to organize other kinds of giving, offering other requisites such as robes, physically helping to build a kuti, or collecting funds towards building a chaitya or an ablution block at the local temple or monastery, or offering funds for medicine, or offering transport. There are so many different things. In terms of Sangha Dana, it could also be supporting a monk or nun to go on Pindapat, to go on alms round, rather than keeping the monk or nun for oneself and for one's family and friends. That monk or nun who goes on Pindapat is one who is practicing renunciation, walking in the footsteps of the Buddha and the noble Arahants, actively practicing to abandon preferences in what they eat, to partake of only what is being put into their bowl. They give up their stomach in order for lay people to make merit. So when we support a Pindapat monk or nun, we help many more people to make merit, more than simply one's own family and friends. Again, stinginess is something that is overcome. And what we see is that the samana sanya, the perception of the ascetic, it can be a very, very powerful one, and that is also what we share with others when we support a Pindapat monk or nun. Especially if that ascetic is virtuous, cultivates the teachings of the Buddha, has the blessings of the practice. So far we've spoken predominantly about the aspect of giving, which is associated with material things, amisa dana. But giving is also associated with giving Dhamma, Dhammadana. And of course there's also sharing material things, helping with material things, sharing Dhamma, helping with Dhamma, all those different things. The reference is in the Dāna Sutta, which is in the Itivuttaka. In that particular teaching, the Buddha says that the giving of Dhamma, sharing of Dhamma, and helping with Dhamma is the foremost of the 2 kinds of giving, sharing, and helping. We can also support someone who is teaching Dhamma. That's also very meritorious. It could be helping to organize a retreat, or offering up our homes as the place for the retreat, offering food for retreatants, offering IT support, offering our research skills, printing Dhamma material, and things like that. Those who give Dhamma, share Dhamma, and help with Dhamma often come to quickly realize that it's not easy to teach Dhamma. There are so many challenges along the way. In the Udāyī Sutta, this is in Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 5, discourse number 159, when the Buddha gives advice to Venerable Ananda, he starts by saying, it isn't easy, Ananda, to teach the Dhamma to others. And then he goes on to give some advice. So what is helpful is to see that the fruit and benefit of giving material things, as well as being virtuous and developing one's practice, this is all part of merit making in order to serve others, to give and share and help others in Dhamma. So it's fruitful for those who teach Dhamma to have an intention when they undertake material generosity that they do so in order to serve others in Dhamma. Because in this way it helps to remove any obstacles, impediments toward teaching Dhamma. And one is not necessarily accruing merit solely for oneself, but towards the process of helping others to grow and develop in Dhamma, whether it is conducting retreats, giving Dhamma talks, sharing Dhamma material, and all those sorts of things. And likewise, when you practice giving in a more refined way, you start to be that good example of Buddha's teaching, to keep practicing what the Buddha taught, what the Buddha encouraged. And teaching Dhamma, giving, sharing, and helping with Dhamma, it's a big part of the Buddha's path. It is the meritorious path, the wholesome path. In another sutta in the Ittavutaka, Bahujanahita Sutta, the Buddha says that there are 3 persons appearing in the world who appear for the welfare of many people, for the happiness of many people, out of compassion for the world, for the good welfare and happiness of devas and humans. The first is the Tathagata, then the noble disciple, and third, the trainee or learner, the Seka. And in this sutta, the Buddha says, the teacher, the great sage, is the first in the world. Following him is the disciple, whose composure is perfected, the Arahant. And then the learner, training on the path, one who has learned much. So this is Bahusutta, and is virtuous. These 3 are chief amongst devas and humans, illuminators, preaching Dhamma. Opening the door to the deathless, they free many people from bondage. Those who follow the path well taught by the unsurpassed caravan leader, who are diligent in the Sublime One's dispensation, make an end of suffering within this very life itself. As we practice giving, it's important to give the best of what we have, not the dregs or the leftovers. If we look at this progression of giving, this is part of chipping away at giving up the best of what we have, giving up our preferences, what we would have preferred to enjoy ourselves. If you remember the Parabhava Sutta, this is Sutta Nipata 1.6, and it looks at the downfall of a person. And one of the things that the Buddha talks about when he's speaking with the Devas is that when one eats fine food alone, despite having abundant wealth, when we cultivate what the Buddha has said in the Thapati Sutta, we're really chipping away at tanha, at craving. So instead of eating fine food alone, we share that with others. We give it up for others. We let go of this stinginess. It could be food, but it could also be the finer things, any kind of sensual pleasures. In this way, we start to reduce our craving for sensual pleasures, which is a very significant thing on the path. And when we do this very consciously, it's a very powerful thing in the development of the Noble Eightfold Path. What makes this even easier is when we develop the path and truly start to see the danger in sensual pleasures, seeing the danger, degradation, and defilement in sensual pleasures, the indebtedness of sensual pleasures. What this leads to is renunciation, nekama. We know all these things we have been speaking about: giving, generosity, giving up, letting go, abandoning defilements, letting go of what is unwholesome, seeing the danger in sensual pleasures, abandoning or renouncing material things. These are all part of the non-greed path. We abandon the greed path and we develop the non-greed path. So the more we connect with Buddha Dhamma, the more this non-greed path really starts to unfold. Our view is also getting corrected as we gradually make progress with how we give up things, let go of things in order to walk the Buddha's path, how we abandon craving, loosen its hold on us, how we see the blessing in renunciation, the benefit and blessing of renouncing the world and worldly things, how we develop wisdom in what the Buddha is teaching us about this whole predicament, this whole mess of suffering. It all starts to come together. Everything in the Buddha's teaching is linked. When we contemplate all the way through, as we practice, certain dhammas start to emerge as insight and wisdom. That is the blessing of the Buddha's path and practice. So one example around food that is quite important is if we find it difficult to give up our food preferences, then what we need to remind ourselves is that we still desire to create a tongue, because we need a tongue in order to taste that food. And we can't create a tongue in isolation. We need the whole body. So this craving to create a tongue, to create a body, is really what binds us to coming back into central realms. And this may not necessarily mean that we are fortunate enough to be reborn into a human rebirth. It may very well be lower realms if we have not corrected our view and if we have been unvirtuous. So it's very important to develop this gradual progression in giving, to really start giving up our preferences. We know that the Devas, they have been very good at giving up. They ascend upwards because of giving, generosity, and also because of virtue. So as we become more open-handed, freely generous, delighting in being able to give up things, we start to consciously see it as giving up craving for sensual pleasures, giving up craving for existence. So when we deepen our understanding of the Four Noble Truths, start to see the importance of developing the Noble Eightfold Path, start to really walk this Noble Eightfold Path, and understand how we come to this predicament, then the gradual progression of giving, generosity, giving up, letting go, renunciation, and relinquishment, it all starts to become clearer, comes into our focus. What this all ultimately leads to is this relinquishment of all, sabanisago. It becomes easier to relinquish all if we have made this progress on the path, leaning towards Nibbana. It is harder if we haven't developed this practice of giving, if we haven't made progress towards renunciation and relinquishment, all the things that culminate in the realization of the non-greed path, as well as the non-hatred path and the non-delusion path. So during this difficult time, where the world is facing so many challenges, where each of us faces different kinds of difficulties and life challenges, we must remember the Buddha's advice in the Mahamangala Sutta. This is Sutta Nipata 2.4. This whole teaching resonates on so many different levels because it talks about the highest blessings. It reminds us that the path we must tread, this wholesome path, is the one that we must prioritize, not the one that is pulling us out towards the troubles of the world, to get absorbed and sink with the troubles of the world. And with respect to what is spoken about on giving, the Buddha says, giving and living by the Dhamma and looking after one's relatives, performing actions that are blameless, this is a higher blessing, a supreme blessing. All the advice given by the Buddha about how to practice in accordance with the Dhamma is advice that we really must heed. This is about practicing in accordance with the Dhamma. It helps us to find relative safety in difficult times, in difficult conditions. The world begs us, implores us to shake, to go with the disturbances, to remain with the wrong view, to falter in our spiritual practice. But if we heed the Buddha's words and practice accordingly, there is real protection in the face of all these difficult things. We may have to endure physical pain and suffering, but the mind can remain steadfast, unshaken, peaceful, and even happy. And as we said at the beginning, there are 4 blessings of giving: long life, good appearance, happiness and strength. Ayu Vanna Sukhang Balang. So we must remember this. And even if you remember our role models such as Visakha, Anathapindika, we have these in mind in the face of the mind saying, it's better to keep what we have, not to give. It's better to hoard. It's better to just take care of ourselves out of fear, out of worry. But when we think about Anathapindika, Visakha, even Visakha's family who gave at the time of the famine in a past life, they gave to a Pacceka Buddha what they had. That is a blessing, a real blessing, because when you give when the conditions are difficult, really difficult, food crisis, famine, power shortages, all those different challenging things, then you remember that these are our role models. These are the ones that really showed at the time of immense difficulty, dire situation. They didn't back down from the path. They didn't go with the anger and fear in the world, which is what the world is throwing at us now. Anger, fear, hatred, all those polarizing things. But rather, like our role models, these lay people who are role models, but also the noble arahants, the Buddha, you don't back down. You practice in accordance with the Dhamma. So we heed the Buddha's words, giving. We make that a priority. Give what we can. And we live by the Dhamma, practice in accordance with the Dhamma. And we look after those that we can. So the mind stays blameless and we can lift the mind. So we can end this session here. Let's share the merit with all sentient beings. May all beings be happy and well. May all beings be free from suffering. Blessings of the Triple Gem, wishing you well. Teruan Saranai.